Welcome to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. Deep dives through the journey of youth sports, what parents experience, what coaches experience, and most importantly, what your kids experience. We'll also feature the latest information, tips, tools, and resources to help parents, coaches, and athletes navigate and improve the culture of youth sports. And now, the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast.
Welcome everybody back to episode number 7 of the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. I'm joined here with Seth Taylor. I'm Travis Snyder, and looking forward to diving into this one. The art of goal setting. What is a fantasy versus what is a dream? Let's start off, Seth. What is a fantasy and what is a dream?
Yeah, so fantasy, we're talking in both situations, we're talking about a mental construct, right? So I have a dream about being a #1 New York Times bestselling author. And that's actually a dream of mine. I'm going to use myself as an example. I really want to be a bestselling author. I've written some books, they've done okay. Now I'd like them to do really well, right? So that can be a mental construct. It can be a fantasy is when it exists only in the mind, right? So it's actually, we call it a dissociative event. It's actually something that you can almost escape into the brain and the actual mental construct. So I can see myself, say, at a book signing, I can visualize that. And a lot of people do, you're driving to your job that you hate or whatever, and you're visualizing yourself in that space you really want to be, right? And it acts as a medicinal thing. So when it's only in the mind, it actually can do a few things for you. You can release a lot of dopamine. You can get a lot of endorphins from it, even if it's exciting in your mind, you see yourself climbing Yosemite or something, rocks in Yosemite, you can get adrenaline from it. You can get all these things from it, but it exists within the mind, and it actually helps you cut you off from your subconscious self. So when we talked about conscious, subconscious, and I think it's episode 2, that's what comes into play here. So fantasy exists within the conscious in a way to protect you from having to feel what's in the subconscious. And oftentimes is what we call a compensatory narrative. So the narrative of the fantasy helps you survive the narrative of what you hold inside, typically trauma. Most of us carry a certain level of trauma within us that kind of keeps us in a subconscious belief system that we don't really deserve greatness or abundance or love or peace or whatever it is that we really desire. So we'll have that story deep within us. And so our fantasies help us create the opposite story. But it lives within the mind to help us survive. Does that make sense?
It does, and I can relate because having had success all the way through my youth playing experience and finally reaching that goal, right, of being a first-round draft pick, going and playing minor league baseball for less than 2 years and being in the major leagues at 20 years old, I felt like I had achieved my dream.
Yeah.
And what we worked through for the last few years, and I'll continue to work through for the rest of my life, is what was actually the dream and what was the fantasy, right? Where the fantasy for me was the unconditional love that I thought I would receive from fans, from friends and family back home. And so much of my self-worth, right, was tied to that dream of being a Major League Baseball player and all the great things that were going to come with it. But really the fantasy was, I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be loved. And that's the thing that was so hard for me as I was transitioning out of playing in these last couple of years, as I was kind of hanging on and getting kicked in the teeth, so to speak, right, with the way things were playing out around the end of my career. But being pushed into that position, right, I really had to face that question. Was this really my dream? What was the underlying motive? What was the thing in my unconscious that was just driving me day in and day out to want to achieve these great things, to then receive that unconditional love, that safety, the things that most people who haven't experienced fame or made a lot of money think that these are going to be the answers to the problem, right? So what would be an example of this in youth sports that you've seen or that you think is pretty...
Yeah, well, it's a very common thing for players to say, well, I want to play at this level, So I'll ask a player. I had a player one time I was training him, and this is back when I was doing one-on-one training on the field. And I said, so what's the goal? And he said, I want to play for the Sounders. And while we live in Seattle, that's our MLS team. And I said, oh, you want to be a pro? He goes, yeah. I go, okay. And a really simple test. I said, knowing that playing professional sports is incredibly hard. This kid was 15, incredibly difficult. It requires a huge amount of work. It is a really, really, really elite space, very elite space, as you know, right? I said, so what did you do today, this weekend, that would indicate to me that you actually want that you took what steps did you take towards that? And he just goes, well, I played played FIFA, it's a video game. And I'm like, okay, all right. Is that going to make you better? Does that get you closer to that dream? No. Right. And so it's this kind of thing where immediately you start to realize that, this is functioning in the mind as a construct, right? And that's how I was trying to help him show it. I showed him over the first several sessions that how that wasn't an actual dream of his. It was a fantasy that the story of being a pro was very appealing to him because it helped him survive some of the deeper feelings that he had about himself. And I had a player just the other day. I was actually working with a guy just the other day, a 14-year-old player. He said the same thing. We were on Zoom and he was eating pizza, drinking a Coke, and he has this really self-destructive kind of way of behaving, and that's why I was working with him. And he said, I want to play high-level college ball, maybe pro. Really? Okay. While he drank a Coke. And I immediately said, does a professional soccer players drink Coke and eat pizza? And he's like, probably not. Why are you doing it though? I like Coke. And it's like this thing where you can see that the narrative of being a high-level player was very divorced from any actual feeling or experience in the body. So that's why it wasn't affecting his decision-making. So it is a dissociated experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can parents tell if their child has a fantasy or has an actual dream?
Well, let's recognize that in different developmental phases, it's very normal, right? It's very normal for young kids to fantasize, right? And so what our job is as parents, part of our job is to help them develop an identity structure. That feeling of I am safe, I am loved no matter what. So that fantasy is a normal part of it. So a kid plays in a fantasy world, right? Well, even when they play video games, like my kid will play Fortnite or whatever like that. He'll play this game and in his mind, he's some sort of, a trained assassin or something like that. And he's not, right? This is all just play. And that fantasy world is a normal thing for kids. What brings it to a dream, what shifts it to a dream is as that foundation develops, I am safe, I am loved no matter what, those things start to move towards like a body experience where eventually when they say, I really want that, like I want to be that, what you'll find is if that is sitting on top of a solid foundation, it automatically switches into action. The reason so many people it never becomes action is because the actual foundation, that identity foundation, that sense, that deep subconscious sense that I am safe, I'm loved no matter what, isn't strong enough to hold the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like the lion and the antelope mindset that we talked about in episode 3. The lion hunts because he's hungry, right? And the antelope runs because he's chased.
Right.
And a lot of times we think we are the lion when we really are the antelope.
We are the antelope.
Right? And helping parents be able to differentiate first with their own selves, right? Because you got to do the work.
Yeah.
But as you're looking at your child and you're saying, okay, my son's telling me as a 7-year-old, he wants to play in the NBA. And he wants to be a famous basketball player, which the word famous for me is like, famous is kind of a double-edged sword here. I think chasing fame and chasing money, as I've experienced, it doesn't bring that fulfillment. But as you mentioned, when they get to that stage out of that developmental process, right, the phase that they go through, being able to help support that dream that has now been established, that this is no longer a fantasy, but this is actually something. How would you encourage parents to maybe have the conversation with the 15-year-old kid who's sitting on the couch eating pizza and drinking a Coke saying, I'm going to play in the MLS one day?
Yeah.
How do you help them? How can a parent approach those conversations, or when is the time to approach that conversation with your child?
Yeah, so this again, we've talked about a lot of this stuff in being constructed like a pyramid, right? And if anybody here's ever remember your Psych 101 classes in college, you'll remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And it's this pyramid structure on how a human being is built, right? So a lot of this depends on that. That kid is 14, 15 that's playing FIFA and drinking the Coke and eating the pizza and saying he wants to be a pro. He's doing that because he's already created a fantasy narrative to compensate for that lack of that foundation. And it's okay. By the way, any parents listening, it's okay. We made mistakes, and most of our kids are struggling with it at some level, including mine. Right? They're not, I'll use examples of how I did it right. I did plenty of things wrong too. Right? And so if they're in that space already, then there's actual real work that needs to be done. Kids have to become aware of their own subconscious. At 15, a parent's no longer building that foundation of identity. It's been built. At that point now, a child, it is that adolescent child, it's their job to begin to become aware of their subconscious. So if they're, how do we point that out? Like when I pointed out to that kid, hey, well, do professional players eat pizza, drink Coke? what I was creating is, a philosophers call it a dialectic tension. I was kind of showing him something. Well, you said this, and you're engaged in this. So there's a tension there that I'm allowing him to feel. And we can help that with our kids. We can help them start to see that tension. But again, the parent's job is to do their own work, period. Recognize, okay, I did some damage, and how do I help them in that? And for my son, like if he were to, when that day comes when he starts to say, I want to be a pro, I'll go, well, if you want to be a pro, yeah, do what pros do. What do you want to do? And just call them to action. It's always call them to action. If they want to be a pro, call them to action. The difference between a dream and a fantasy is dreams stimulate action. If it's held in the body and the foundation is strong, that will happen very naturally. Can't force it. Okay, it's because you'll go. I tried this, actually. I did this thing. It was ridiculous, but I tried it because I was kind of curious what would happen. I told my son, hey, son, he's weighing a Nerf gun. So I said, if you come to me, because I want him to learn how to really touch a soccer ball. To do that, you need juggle balls. It's the quickest way to do it. I said, if you can come to me and you can show me 20 juggles on your feet without the ball touching the ground, I'll take you to the store, buy any Nerf gun you want. That was like 8 months ago. Hasn't spent one single second working on it. Not one single second. Right? Because he's not ready for that. Right? Now, if he's 15 and he's doing the pizza thing and that foundation's not strong and I do the same thing, I'll get the same result. He won't spend one single second on it because he's still trapped back in those years, just like my kid, where he's in those developmental years trying to get those needs met. And pizza and Coke and sitting and playing FIFA feels very, very safe, which is why he does it. So you're still dealing with that same subconscious task, right? But now, because of his stage he's in, he has to do the work. Does that make sense?
It does. With my own children, one of my favorite questions to ask them is, how much have you practiced? Right? When kid starts a new sport, maybe it's basketball, and maybe dribbling the ball is a challenge for them.
Yeah.
And again, without saying you need to, and I made this mistake, right? I bought the Dribble Up, which is an app that you can have your kids practice and gamify it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is going to be a perfect way to get him engaged in something he's told me he wants to get better at, right? And I've used the line, how much have you practiced? But I took it one step too far.
Right.
And I bought this thing, and we set it up, and kind of the first day it was fun, it was exciting, and then day 2 I set it up.
Yeah.
Lasted 3 seconds. I don't like this anymore. Because you can tell, right? You create that, you got to earn something. Right? Instead of what I think our best move was as parents was, not everyone can do this, but there's parks and places where you can access. We bought him a basketball hoop. Nothing crazy, nothing fancy, but there's a basketball hoop out there.
Yeah.
And he's constantly telling me, hey, I want to be a basketball player when I grow up. I don't have to force him, right? Yeah. He has found it in him at this stage. Doesn't mean he's going to be an NBA basketball player. Doesn't mean he's going to play basketball in high school. But at this stage, it's what he's interested in doing. Yeah. And having the hoop out there gives him a safe space to go out there. He'll do it on his own. He'll want to play with me too, right? And we talked about that in previous episodes. Yeah. The more we want to put rigid structures and expectations, the quicker they're going to shut down, similar to the Dribble Up experience. Mm-hmm. Being able to take something as simple as going to a basketball court or purchasing a basketball hoop and putting it in your driveway, allowing your kids that space, right? To then go out there and work through it. And I see him, he's out there, he's pretending he's this guy, he's out there, he's doing the shots. I got nothing to do with that, right? Other than just, like you said, facilitating it in a way where it's not me saying you have to take 1,000 shots a week, otherwise you got
right.
Immediately that just brings them down, emotionally shut down.
When again, this is about recognizing the phases they're in. Right. Recognizing in this stage, that's not the task. The task is to go out there and do some hardcore practice to get better. People that do that are doing damage, which is why so many pro athletes are so damaged. I mean, it's a really common thing. Most pro athletes live with really high levels of anxiety, depression, this kind of thing. And they're just starting to talk about it because the sports world is kind of behind the culture when it comes to just our ability to be vulnerable. But it's just not normal. What we're trying to do is build foundation. And the best thing you can do is facilitate. That's play therapy, by the way. Mm-hmm. Play therapy, which is how children do therapy under the age of about 11, right? Because play is this language. In a play therapy room, if you were to get your kids to go to play therapy, they walk in a room and there's just toys everywhere. And the therapist just kind of sits there and they just let them play. And they just kind of go, you did that. You're doing that all by yourself. You're doing that. Good job. And they only 1 minute. I'm not even supposed to say that. I'm not even supposed to give the feedback. They just let them express, let them play, let them work it out. So when you put a basketball hoop there and you set a ball there and you walk away, put a little hidden camera, eventually kids just come out and they start expressing. Now let them play against their neighborhood friends. And now we start to move faster and all those things start to develop. That's why all the greats developed on the streets. You know what I mean? That's where they developed their game. Leo Messi was just talking about the other day in an interview, just talking about like, yeah, we just play in the streets. That was how we did it. I was running with the older kids trying to keep up, but they were freed from that feedback loop, that love.
Which with where youth sports has gone, right? And I was talking to a group of my friends who are part of these successful teams.
Yeah.
It was like, some of our best memories are playing Little League and on the summer club teams and all that. But really, when you go back to it, it's those core memories, right? Of playing in the cul-de-sac, where it's you and 6 of your buddies, the Sandlot, for example,
right.
And being able to take a very non-strenuous, I mean, there's competitiveness amongst the kids, right? And they kind of work that out themselves.
Yeah.
But giving them that space and that opportunity to just go play without parents, without coaches, without expectations, let them create their own rules of engagement and how they want to play it. Obviously, if it's unsafe, parents step in, but understand that giving them those opportunities to just play with it or just play with their basketball, massive in terms of them getting the skill development that every parent wants to see, right? But not in a way where it's being forced.
Yeah.
And as we come back, we're going to dive deeper into how we can help them set those goals and achieve those.
Absolutely.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like Hero, an interactive guidebook taking parents of young athletes on a journey through their own experiences and perspectives, and how to approach the balance between being a loving parent and encouraging your child to push through challenges and excel in their endeavors. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.
How can we teach our kids to set goals in a way that's helpful?
Yeah, so goal setting is tricky, right? Because we do this all the time. We go, when I was a kid, your coach would be like, okay, we're going to set 3 goals for the season and 3 goals for individually and 3 goals for the team. And you write down your goals. And it made no sense. It doesn't make sense to kids. You go, well, I want to do good. Is that your goal? Yeah. I want to have a great season. Yeah. I want to score. I had a player the other day who was a college soccer player. And I said, well, what's your goals for the season? Well, I think 9 to 12 goals is my goal. And I go, why not 20? Like, what do you mean? And I go, no, I tell you, he goes, well, I want to keep it realistic. I go, wow, so you're limiting yourself. He's like, well, no, I'm not trying to limit myself. I was kind of like bugging him about the fact that you're not doing this in a way that's helpful. I said, what's your real goal, man? Where do you want to go with this? And he's like, we'll play at the highest level. I go, are we talking about the World Cup, English Premier League? He said, yeah. I go, all right, that's the goal. That's the goal. And then we're going to let that goal show you what the next step is. Does that make sense? Because the goal can't be for production. The goal has to be for training, period. So if you want your kids to set goals that are helpful when it comes to the thing, just ask them what their dream is. Well, what's your dream? I want to play at this level. And then do this. If it's a basketball player and he says, I want to play in the NBA. Go, great. Go get him a Michael Jordan poster of Jordan just in the air, just dunking, hanging on his wall, and then put a little sign underneath it that says, I believe in you. That's it. I believe in you. Right? And then show him, I love, a few years ago, there was these bracelets people would say the WWJD. You remember those things? What would Jesus do? Yep. What would Jordan do is a good way to do it as well, because you go, well, in this moment, if you're him, look at him in the air. If you're him in this moment, what's your dream telling you to do? And of course, your kid's going to go practice.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to be like that? Let's do what he does. And you'll see it draws you forward. So real goal setting is about having a dream. Yeah. Not a dream for this season. Kid, that doesn't make any sense to kids. Like, even when they get to high school, when you're older, if your eye is on the dream, then this season becomes about, okay, what am I doing for my game? What am I adding to my game? I said to my son the other day, he's like, well, I want to get elevated to the next team. I go, buddy, you want to play the World Cup someday, right? And he goes, yeah. I go, get out A teams, B teams, C teams, all that crap at select soccer. Yeah. Go see yourself scoring for the national team and then ask it, what is it telling you to do? And he's like, practice. No, right. I go, it's all that matters. I said, let's you and me not even talk about what team you're on until you're like 17. Talk there. That's your showcase year. And if you want to get scouted by colleges and pros, that's a good year. I said, well, let's talk there. For now, what's your dream want to do? Yeah. That makes sense?
Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
the awareness to where you're at now.
Yeah.
Right. And then using the acronym that we use in the player journal, right, which is ICER.
Yeah.
The intent, what is it you want to get better at, right? And you have to have the awareness of where you're at.
Right.
Conviction and what it is you need to do next, right? And that could be go practice. That could be talk to a coach. That could be
one step. Next step.
Focus on that next step.
Yeah.
Execute that step, right? And then what I think is most important is reflection.
Yeah.
And I love what we did in that journal because it allows the kid to go through this process and then reflect on it, right? Because you can have intent, you can be convicted, and you can execute, and it doesn't go the way you want.
Right.
But if you never take the time to reflect, and we don't just reflect on the tactical and the technical, right? Which is something we talk about being the focus in youth sports and sports in general, is how do we get better at this skill, or how do we, improve the team dynamic of a player, whatever it is. But what's stopping you? A lot of times is something in the unconscious, right? And that's what excites me the most about the Athlete's Journal, is being able to teach kids how to reflect on those experiences without just saying, well, I didn't score the goal, or I didn't do the 20 reps of whatever skill it was that I was supposed to develop. What's really that resistance, right, that we're finding in the reflection? How important do you feel like that is for anybody listening to this, but parents who are looking at their kids and trying to help them? Like, how important is that reflection period?
Right. Yeah, that's incredibly important. But understanding too that kids reflect differently when they're young than they do when they're older, right? So kids are, you ask them a couple basic questions and they're ready to move on. But again, it's about keeping them focused on that dream and going, what would your dream ask you to do? What does it want you to do right here? And it's just about one step, because kids can't think. A 9-year-old, a 10-year-old can't think 4 steps down the road.
Yeah.
So ask them to have long-term goals doesn't make any sense. Ask them to have a dream. Yeah, let them fantasize. Like, hey, let's spend a couple minutes just dream about dunking like that. You're dunking over the top of somebody. Just put that in your mind. And then what's that dream want you to do? Well, it wants me to work on this or that. Okay, let's do that. Go do that. And just let that nurture. And then recognize too that in those years, man, letting those fantasies soak into their bodies is how it becomes a dream. And when they move into adolescence, if that foundation is strong, they'll naturally, they'll be those ones. If you put a basketball hoop out there, all of a sudden at 10 o'clock at night, you're going, dude, you got to stop dribbling, man. I'm trying to go to bed. You know what I mean? It'd be that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Which has happened to me, But the thing is, in high school, that's all we did. We put lights out there. That's all we did, right? We just, our foundations were so poor. Our emotional foundations were so poor that we would never be able to actually take that thing into the real, and pushing it into a competitive arena.
Yeah. And be able to reflect in a way where it's like, I'm either good or I'm bad, right? Instead of, oh no, this is something that I need to become more aware of.
Right.
That is in my unconscious, that is distracting me or preventing me or have this resistance. I want to actually go and work on the skill. And again, going back to the title, Fantasy versus a Dream, helping them kind of uncover, is this something I really want?
Yeah.
Right? And why do I want that?
Yeah.
Because the why behind anything is so important for kids and for adults, right? As we develop and understand, if there's no why, then where's the motivation coming from? And throwing motivation out the window, where's the discipline coming? You don't really want it, you're probably not going to do it.
Right.
So as we move forward, we talk about setting achievable and realistic goals. Is that important, and why?
Yeah, achievable and realistic. I really wanted to bring this up. We were talking before about what we want to bring into this content because achievable, a lot of people talk about in goal setting, like, well, make sure they're achievable and make sure they're realistic. And realistic is a really problematic word. And even achievable is, because achievable just has to do with time. Is it achievable for my 10-year-old to play in the World Cup? Of course not, right? But is it achievable for him to train today? Yes, it is, right? So the dream kind of does that, right? So, a lot of times what I try to do is keep all the goals focused on the type of game you want, right? So it's about the game. That's it. It's about your game. It's not about competition. It's about good, bad, what team you're on. It's none of that. It's what's in your game, what's not. And so an achievable thing and realistic, I kind of get those out, and I leave those words behind and just simply say, what do you want? What do you want in your game? What do you want out of it? I always talk about it like it's a lunchbox, to use your kind of analogy, right? It's a lunchbox. What do you want in there? What do you want out of there? Let's get some of the junk food out of there. Let's get some healthy stuff in there. Do you need a left foot in there? You're a soccer player. Do you have a left foot in your lunchbox? No. Well, should we get that in there? Right, we should get that in there. That's part of it, because that guy who's playing in the World Cup, we were talking about yesterday as a parallel universe. You use some kind of quantum physics stuff. said, understand that on a subatomic level, the future is now. The past is now. Everything's here. So it's not in the future. It's right here, right now. I said, so that future you that's playing that World Cup is right here. Does he have left foot? Yes, he does. Okay, how do you get that left foot? Train. Okay, what should we do? Train. And it always brings back to this really realistic thing, right? Most of the time when parents talk about realistic, and even when coaches, when they talk about keep it realistic, that's actually what's realistic is dictated from our fears, from our traumas, from the deep, deep down inside that we're never going to make it. So what's realistic is whatever's safest, right? Well, you're probably not. I mean, I had a player. This is a really interesting story. I had this player years ago, 15 years old, and he was just coming back from brain cancer. He'd had brain surgery, and his body had kind of forgotten how to move and how to walk. So his father asked me if could you train him? Could you do the therapeutic with him on the field? So the idea was to start getting his soccer movements back. He'd been a decent level club player, and he wants to get his soccer movements back. And I asked him, I said, what are your goals? I want to be a professional player. I'm like, oh, okay, you want to play? Yeah, now he's 15. Now I can see right away, that's not realistic, quote unquote, right? But understanding what a dream is made complete sense to me. His father heard that, and I could see the sadness on his face. And I asked him later, I said, are you okay? And he said, it's just heartbreaking to hear that, he wants to play pro. I go, he doesn't really want to play pro. That's a fantasy. It's helping him survive this trauma, right? But when I said to him, I said, okay, awesome. You want to be pro? Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what that looks like. I said, sure, certainly you understand how difficult this is going to be. And he goes, yes. I go, all right. Well, let's find out if you're willing to put in the work. Because if you are, you can do it. That's why I said, you can do it. You just got to know what the work is. Now, within a few months, he realized oh, that was a fantasy of mine, not a real dream. Because when I started going, okay, let's put in the work now. Let's go. He didn't want to put in the work. He wanted to play FIFA. He wanted to relax. He wanted to do anything. And he realized after a while, oh, that was something that was, and I taught him, see how it's something that's helping you survive. Yeah, survive what? The traumas. It was cool because he started to take his vision off being a professional player and he started moving into a vision of, I just want to heal now. I want to heal out of this trauma so that he can just be okay.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a lot of memories and examples of people that I played with in my youth career that I see now that have struggled with that transition of no longer being a baseball player or whatever sport it was. Everybody knows the guy that was really good at football, really good at baseball in high school that just couldn't let it go, right? And I think how lucky that kid is to have worked with you through that process to really be able to uncover that through his own process, right? Yeah. Not just saying this is unrealistic, but no, it is until you say it's not, right? Until you make that shift in understanding that this is something I've done either to earn that unconditional love I wasn't receiving or that safety that I don't feel because of whatever I'm dealing with. Yeah. But how difficult it is, and I think some parents listening to this can probably relate. They had a good run in sports at some level, right? High school, maybe college, maybe you played professional, right? Yeah. Similar to me, that it was so important for me to start tearing down the walls or peeling back the layers, right, of the dream versus the fantasy that I had created, right, to really understand how that part of my unconscious that was just holding on to that desire to be safe and desire to be loved was really actually working against me, right? When it came to going out and doing the things later in my careers, I got triggered by getting sent down and getting injured and all these things that I wanted to blame everybody else, right? And not take responsibility for the emotional attachment that I had to this need that was unmet. And I think we can all look around in our group of friends and probably find one or two people, right, that experienced that in high school or maybe in Little League or maybe in college, that they felt like their needs were going to get met by some level of success or achievement. And what it leads to is a very dysfunctional adult experience of the real world, right? Because we're protected in sports by the uniform and by the clout of being on the football team. I think junior college is a great example in the baseball world. We see a lot of kids that have this dream to play D1, right? And for whatever reason, they don't make it out of high school and they go to a junior college, which plenty of players have gone from junior college to the major leagues, right? Gone D1, whatever else. But a lot of times kids get there. And I want to bring this up, the flag planting, because this is one of my favorite things that you've taught me over the years is how quickly people want to just plant that flag and say, okay, I made it to the next level. I'm safe. And then it creates that ceiling, right? And that floor that we've talked about with that comfort zone identity. Yeah. Explain to the people that are listening, what is that flag plant and how can we be more aware of it?
Well, that goes back to that emotional foundation. If the emotional foundations, that identity formation, those first 10, 12 years isn't strong, then what happens is the ego, the human ego, is constructing. That's what the problem with the goal setting. It's constructing those dreams and more like a fantasy. It becomes stories that are about maintaining the story to compensate for the hurt down here. The flag planting phenomenon is a psychological phenomenon where someone gets to a certain level where that narrative is solid, at a junior college level or at a high school, at a youth level.
Major League Baseball.
Yeah. You're a great example of that, right? Where I'm here, I'm good. And then this next level, which you were never going to be good at first, you were going to be a dude with a lot of talent that's going to have to take some hits, right? And you get to that level and you've already planted the flag. You got to a certain level where the narrative was so strong that you're okay. And the narrative subconsciously is I am not okay. And it's held together, and you subconsciously plant a flag and say, I did it. And the problem is in that space, and this is very, very common, okay, because players are constantly getting elevated. So it's very, very common for a player to get elevated to the next level. And we discovered they had planted a flag at the last level, and they get here and it triggers all that trauma. And it disintegrates that narrative, which was never real. It was always an illusion that you were good when you were never good. You were only good at this level. Yeah. But we plant a flag there and say that this is, and then therefore it's that's why we can get to a major league level and say, I accomplished my dream. Well, your dream was to get to the majors? That wasn't a dream. Your dream was $100 million in a major league all-star and all this kind of stuff. That's what we wanted, but your psyche was pointed to this one story, this one narrative, and you planted a flag there. And we know it because the second you get to this space, that trauma triggers, and all of a sudden you're not safe. And then your psyche will do all kinds of things. I mean, I've watched players who get injured constantly because you can tell their ego is trying to get them out of here because it's not safe.
Yeah. I think a good example in youth baseball is going to the Little League World Series. And I shared my story of my experience at the Western Regionals, but you got a group of kids from all over the world, right? Different teams that come to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is one of my favorite events in the past to watch on TV, but I kind of watch it from a different perspective, right? Because you understand the label and the expectation that those kids are carrying as soon as they achieve that goal of going to the Little League World Series. And then every baseball field they step on for the next 5 years, that's the kid that played in the Little League World Series. Yeah. And those are the whispers amongst the parents and amongst the other team, or a kid that commits early to a Division I university as a sophomore, and now they got to carry that label all the way through their high school playing. Yeah. And that's that piece that parents overlook. It's like, oh, this is such a great thing. My kid achieved their goal. Yeah. And it's like, well, where are they really at in this process, right? And how do we, again, help them navigate through that and understand where the next step is? Because it's so easy to plant that flag and then just look around and say, oh man, I don't know what to do, right? Because I've already achieved it. And so, no, what's the next thing I need to focus on to get to that real dream of being what I said I want? Yeah.
Well, and that's an interesting one because as a parent, even when your kids go beyond the developmental years, your kids 17, 18, 19, 20, they're playing college ball or they got drafted, they're playing those levels. If we recognize that a lot of them never had their needs met, okay, we did our best. That's all you can do as a parent. They never had their needs met, but we can recognize that there's still some foundational duty that we have. We can still play that role for them. But when we see them wavering, we see them struggling, they've got to do their own work. There's no question once they get to those ages. But we can also come in and say, hey, I'm here and I love you and I'm with you no matter what. And that actually can give a bit of a boost to that, but helping them realize, that's why we got to be vulnerable. We got to be honest about what you went through as a kid. I was working with a Major League Soccer player and I had a really great conversation with his dad. Yeah. And he's just said same kind of thing. He's like, well, I was one of those dads, but he was honest with his kid. And that allowed some of that vulnerability to come out, allowed him to heal a little bit, which is helpful.
Well, and I'm excited too, because on our next episode, number 8, we're going to dive into the resistance, right? And that's helping parents and kids and coaches understand what's going on beneath the surface, what's really holding you back from achieving that dream and what's making it a difference.
Yeah, right. Let's do it.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like 3A Sports Journals, Many athletes don't journal because they simply don't know how it can be helpful to their process. Elite athletes around the world use journaling from an early age to help them face the tough challenges of sports. If your kids want to go from good to great, they need to learn how to journal. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.